Shalom and welcome to Learning Biblical Hebrew with Avraham Ben Shalom. Today we're going to focus on lesson number 1. Before we can begin this lesson, we're going to focus on about how Hebrew verbs work. Okay? So we're going to talk about the grammatical issues about Hebrew words. First off, let's learn something about Hebrew words. Number 1, Hebrew words are built, the verbs we're going to talk about right now, and as well as even nouns and adjectives, they're all built on the same thing. But they're all built upon what's called a root. What's a root? A root are basically 3 letters that are used in combination to create a specific meaning. Let's look at, for example, the root kaf, tav, bet. Kaf, tav, bet is the root that means to write. When we take this root and we want to use it in its verbal form, every verb in biblical Hebrew has to be used with a pronoun. In English, we utilize pronouns like this: I, you, he, she, and these are basically separate words. When we write, for example, ran, walked, said, did, we separate our verbs from our pronouns. And therefore, we have a complete new thing we have to learn when we're going to Hebrew. Why is this? Because the subject pronoun, such as I, we attach to our verb, such as the word ran. And therefore, we say this together as one word. And when I mean one word, I literally mean that it be one fluid statement that you would say. For example, if I was to put the root kaf, tav, bet right into this chart, I would say ektov. Ektov would mean I will write. If I wanted to use in the past tense, I would use the first person past tense form, such as here. Katafti, which then again would mean I wrote. Notice, katafti is one fluid statement. It's not a separate statement such as I wrote. It's one fluid one, katafti. And this equals the same thing as what we wrote down here. This might get some used to, and it takes time to get used to knowing the fact that one fluid statement can create the same element as these 2 words, I and wrote. But this is only because we're having to change from English into Hebrew. So, what do we need to learn about roots? And what do we need to understand about these charts? Okay? I want to take you on a journey with these charts. And I want you to see for yourself how these charts are utilized. If you were to go to my site and you were to look up verb charts in the verb section, and you were to check out the Paul chart, this is what you would find that you'd be going to see in the verb chart section. You would see a chart that starts with I and moves all the way down to you, to he, then she, we, you plural, and then lastly they. Now you're looking at this and you're not even saying to yourself, I have complete understanding of this chart. This makes total sense. Well, I'm not expecting you to make sense out of it yet. Because right now, what I'm trying to get you to understand is the fact that the chart itself is actually based upon knowing that we have pronouns that are attached to verbs. And this is the most important part. Because the verb, which comes from the root, kaf, tav, bet. Kaf, tav, bet means to write. When I want to use it in the chart, I'm going to put it according to the pronoun that I need to use it with. So let's work on understanding the pronouns here. From the very top, I want to share with you, this is the first person, I. That aleph indicates the pronoun I. Next is just going to be the root, which is the verb, the action. Next one down is you, and it's the masculine form. And that's indicated by the tav. The next one down has the tav and the yud at the very end with the spaces where we put the root. Here, this is the feminine form of the word you. This chart here represents the future, also known as the incomplete action. The yud here is the pronoun he. And of course, once again, the spaces indicate where we put the root, which tells us the action. The one underneath it, the tav, is for she. Now notice, this looks identical to the you masculine. So context is going to tell you whether or not you translated something correctly. Whether it was she or whether it was you masculine. The next is the nun, which represents we. After that, we get to you, and this is the plural form, as well as the masculine form. This one is used for when you're talking to boys and girls. And you see the vav is at the end, and the tav is in the beginning, and the root would go in between. The next one is you plural, but this is the feminine form. We see the tav in the beginning, the nun and the hey at the end, and of course the root of the verb goes in the middle. The last, we're going to find the last two, is the plural for the third person, which is they. And this is the masculine form. So we got the yod in the front, just like we had the yod for he. But the plural is indicated by the vav with the u sound at the end. And lastly, we have the plural form, which is feminine. We have the tav, just like we have the word for she. And we have the nun and the hey. And of course our root goes right in the middle. And as you can see, the you, feminine, is similar to the they, feminine, and that would be indicated by context. So, if I took any root that is in the Pa'al verb chart, that's for the whole verbs. And we're going to learn about whole verbs for a second here. Whole verbs are verbs by which the root is visible throughout the whole morphology chart. And what does morphology mean? It just means basically that the root changes in different forms based upon what pronoun we have to attach it to. So the root, if I put in all of these places here, we would see kaf, tav, bet would be visible throughout each of these pronouns that are connected to the root verb. And therefore, we call these roots, such as katav, shalem. Shalem means whole, which means the whole verb itself stays intact throughout the whole process of its going through, whether it's the future or the past tense. Now we've seen the future tense, let's look at the past tense. The past tense starts once again with the same idealism. We have I, you masculine, we have you feminine, we have he, she, we, you plural feminine, and they, which also has only one, by which both the masculine and the plural end with. And let's look at this chart a little closer so we can see what it is we're looking at here. So if you look over here, and we begin to see, starting from top, you see T is for I. Ta is for you masculine. Ta is for the you feminine. The he, there is no pronoun that's attached. This is only assumed and understood that this is the masculine form. Only thing that will be visible is the root. She has the hey at the end. We has nu, so we know that this is the plural form for I. And then tem, we see has you. That's going to be the masculine plural form of you. Ten, we see as the feminine plural form of you. And of course the u, very similar to what we learned over here when we saw the they, the u. We see here, in this point, u has at the end, and that's they for both the masculine and the feminine forms. And this helps us understand the most important part of the beginning process of learning about how roots work and about the verb forms. Why do I need to know this chart, and why is this chart so important for me to memorize in the very beginning? As we go along and we learn throughout these lessons that we're going to be going through, we need to have these memorized in our head so we can understand what pronoun form we're using. Because the verb, like I said, is always connected to the actual pronoun. So if I know the verb and I know what the pronoun is, then I'm able to understand who is the subject and what is the action. Maybe if I didn't know the actual verb, but I knew the pronoun, once again, I'm able to at least understand who the subject is. I now just have to look up what is the action that it's performing. And this is so important and so needful to be utilized. Now, I suggest if you're going to continue with this lesson, go to my website, yadrama.wordpress.com, and go to the section that says Verbs, and download the actual PDF that says Pa'al Verb Chart. And also the other verb charts too, the PL, the HeFil, the NeFil, the HitPa'al, the Pu'al, and the Hafal. Download all the charts and then afterwards put it in a binder so that as you're going through each of these lessons and we talk about a specific verb chart or a specific form, you can turn to the page and you can find the actual vocalization for that verb form as well as the setup of how it's going to be. We're going to see that there are going to be verbs that are going to be very special. They're going to fall off, and therefore I want you to also download the special chart that says the Pa'al special verbs. And that one will help you with utilizing all the special forms that we will come across here and there, and of course how they're going to look in their verb form. Why am I going over this first? Well, you know, this book, as we're going to go through it, doesn't go over this chart first and foremost before it goes into the subject. And I prefer to go over this because in order to understand how the verb is going to be and what's going to be going on and how we're going to dissect things and understand it, you need to understand the pronoun chart that's connected to the verb. Because if you know what the future and the past tense pronoun chart looks like, you have an already good understanding of noting the fact that you are with the I, the you, the he, the she, the we, and so forth. And you're able to understand the fact of how these charts are going to be utilized to help further your understanding of how to identify the pronoun in the verb. The pronoun for verbs in the future are very simple. The pronoun, when it's on the right side, this is future. When it's on the left side at the very end, this is past. And so based upon these two categories, you can identify real quickly if your verb's a future or a past tense verb. We haven't gone into present tense, but we'll learn that later. Right now, I want to focus just upon the fact of understanding the future and understanding the past. The charts, as you will realize, will not say I, you, he, and she, and we. So this video is going to be great for you to take it, utilize what you see in this video, and you're able to utilize it in the actual chart itself. So you can write it down. I made the chart specifically so that a person could visually see what they're looking at and identify the fact that everything that's being put into the category it's put into, you can easily say, oh, this is a pa'al, and also this is the future, or this is the past tense. And you'd be able to identify it with that. So, without further ado, let's begin with our lesson. As we continue forth in Lesson 1, we're going to be learning in Lesson 1 through 8, 50 vocabulary words. So, in order to go through those 50 vocabulary words, I figured I'll go through you with these words one at a time. We'll learn each 50 of these words together. You can write them down, and then afterwards, when we go through the lessons, you're going to be utilizing these words. So I suggest you use a 3x5 card, write down these words, and start memorizing what it is you're looking at. Now, when it comes to the roots, especially the verbs that we're going to be looking at, I want you to understand there's going to be something important that you're going to have to understand and see. And that is, it is best to take the chart of the pa'al, find the one that belongs to it as we go through the lessons, and take one card and write the front, the root, and write in the back the actual root form with the pronoun. So start with I. So example like ek tov, write on one side of the card. On the other side of the card, write the word kaf, tav, bet. And I'll give you a good example of this. This is going to help you tremendously with memorizing the verbs and also memorizing the forms. So on one side of the card, write kaf, dot, tav, dot, bet. And then underneath it write to write. Now when you flip the card over, place on the other side the word with the vowelization. Ek tov. So, on here, place underneath it, I will write. And why am I doing this? Why is that I'm saying do this? It's because the way this book is designed, it wasn't designed with the attitude that you would actually think about the verb charts like you should. Matter of fact, it was almost like the way the book was made so that you would just remember the root, but then you would forget how you would be saying it because you're not remembering that when you take the root to write, well, to write, that's the infinitive form. If I'm using ek tov, which is a future form, or ketavti, which is past, I have a problem. Because now I have to remind myself, how do I say kaf, tav, bet, which is the root, in the past tense form? I have to remind myself that T is the word for I, and katav is the word for wrote. So I had to remind myself, and this is why I'm saying write it, I will write for ek tov, or if I wrote katavti, write I wrote. This way you can memorize your vocabulary, and actually you'll learn a lot more vocabulary than you actually will have, which is utilizing the book and the back index. There's over 415 words you're going to be using in this lesson, and the lesson is going to comprise to up to 55 lessons by which we will go through step by step learning Biblical Hebrew. I'm going to so many times deviate from the book because I want to help create a better understanding of these words and also help you with your vocabulary and build up your ability to even translate and write stuff for yourself. So the book is meant to basically teach you how to get into the text and translate, but it's very mechanical. I want to take away as much of the mechanical form of this as possible and make this as easy and as fluid as it can be. Because when you can learn to write and you can learn to read and you can memorize your vocabulary, you can actually build vocabulary for yourself to actually learn how to say things in Biblical Hebrew. And that's my point. So I want to utilize a few aspects of different grammatical elements from different books of things that you can find out there and squish them into ability to taking this dry book, which has a lot of great information to help you learn how to dissect words and dissect things in Hebrew, but add a livelihood in it by which you can take Hebrew and make it alive for yourself, where you can actually physically use it, not just for the fact of learning how to read in Hebrew or write in Hebrew, but actually understand the grammatics of Hebrew far greater than you would in the book. And so that this will be my introductory course of learning Biblical Hebrew, and I want to help you learn so that you can really grow and thrive in your study of Biblical Hebrew. So let's go through the 50 vocabulary words that you're going to be utilizing with this book and with all of the things that we'll be doing in these lessons. Now I suggest that as you're taking your vocabulary, that when it comes to the verbs, like I said, take the card and split your index card, where this is the front and this is the back. This way you can work on memorizing your vocabulary and getting an understanding of it. With verbs, I want you to do this, right? Kaf, tav, bet. If that was your verb root, okay? Then, underneath it, write to write, okay? On the back, if you want to, you can divide it into two parts. You could put up here your future tense, ektov, and then you will put on top, I will write, and then on the bottom you can put your past tense, katafti, and you can put the word I wrote. This way you're utilizing your index cards to help you with really getting a hold of knowing how to say it in the future as well as how to say it in the past. We'll get into the present tense, but there's only 4 forms for the present tense. So I'm not so worried about the present tense, as the past and future is quite complex. So here, if you take your verbs and you write this on one side of the card and write these on the back of the card, you're going to be able to grow and have these words memorized and say it out loud. I'm going to make an audio of these vocabulary words with the actual future and past tense for the verbs, as well as an audio for the actual nouns or adjectives or prepositions, whatever the vocabulary is for the section. And I will label it lesson 1 through 8, vocabulary 1 through 50. So you can practice hearing it out loud and memorizing how to pronounce the actual word and say it with as much fluency as you can. So one video I'm going to leave is going to be just based on the vocabulary, and it's going to be just the audio of the vocabulary. This video we're going to focus upon learning what we need to do for study skills so we can really grow in our vocabulary. and we can also get ourselves to memorize the sounds of these words and become quite very fluent with actually utilizing these words. Even if we don't see these things, we don't have to worry about it, because this book's not going to go through every single vocabulary thing. It's not going to show the I all the time, or maybe it won't even show this I. Maybe it only shows the U, but it wants you to memorize this stuff. I want you to go beyond that with this video. I want you to be able to take anything that you have with this vocabulary, and I want you to be able to actually physically know all these vocabulary words. Think about it. If you take how many vocabulary we have I, you feminine, he, she, we. Then you have you masculine, you feminine plural, they, and they, because for future. So if you look at it, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You have 10 ways of saying this one word in the future tense. In Hebrew, you have 9 ways of saying. So that's 19 ways of saying this word right, whether future or past. We haven't even gotten into present tense. We haven't even gotten into infinitive forms. So you can see how massively larger your vocabulary is going to be. Rather than just merely 415 words, you're learning 415 words and the ability of saying the word right in 19 different ways. Eventually, you're going to be able to say it not just in 19 different ways. You're going to be able to say it in the command form, which is 4 different ways. So that's 20, 21, 22, 23. All right. Then you're going to be able to say it in the present tense, that's 4, so that's now 27. And then you're also going to be able to say it in the infinitive form, and you're going to be able to say it in 3 different infinitive forms. So now you got up to 30 different ways of saying it. Okay? So you have 30 different ways of using the word right. You're going to see how massive your ability to speak Hebrew is actually going to enhance because of the ability to create a larger form for your vocabulary. That's this part. Now let's get to the actual vocabulary that we're going to be learning. The first word I'm not going to write because it is the name of God. Okay? It's Yud He Vav He. So we're going to leave that here as blank because I don't want to erase God's name. It is very special and we don't do that. So let's go on to vocabulary number 2. Vocabulary number 2 is very special. And it's the word kol. Kol means all, or every, or any. One thing we're going to have to learn about Hebrew is very conceptual. So kol has to do with this concept of the entirety of something. So you can see in Hebrew, we'd have different ways of saying it based upon our need. And that would mean that in English, when we're translating it, of course, not every time is all going to make sense, but any may not make sense, but every will make sense better than these. So you can see how we're going to be utilizing that. Number 3, we have the word asher. Asher is a relative pronoun. It can mean who, that, in which. Asher. We're going to see how it's utilized, and you obviously can see by knowing these words you can kind of get an idea of who. Now remember, who, we're not talking who is the question, we're talking who is in the relative pronoun. Okay, now the next one is going to be 4. We're going to use the word el, which means to or unto. Very important thing about el we're going to utilize is the fact that el is only used with verbs of speech, such as I swear, I said, I spoke, I told, and also it's going to be verbs of movement, such as he ran, he went, he traveled. That's going to be our verbs of movement that we're going to be understanding, that L is only going to use to. The next one we're going to have is going to be the root Aleph Mem Resh, which means to say. The next one after that is going to be our negator, which means not. Also, it can be used as no or didn't. You're going to see that there's going to be a fluctuation of how the word low is going to be used. And the context will make a lot of sense based upon the fact of knowing, oh, well, that's what you would say in a future tense, or oh, that's what you would say in just a statement of, negating something, not, okay? Number 7, we use the word ben, which is the word for son. In Hebrew, the root ben comes from the root bana, which means to build, because a son is considered an extension of the home. Let's go to number 8. Number 8 we have is going to be a preposition, al. And prepositions, this one has quite of a unique usages, because it can mean upon, it can mean over, it can mean against, and that would be like in opposition to, not against, like as in against something. Okay. It can also be used as on account of. It can be used also as near. It's also another usage for al, and that's going to be what we're going to be seeing here. Number 9, we're going to be utilizing this next one, which is key. Okay, key, this is a conjunction that can mean for, that, because, when it's whenever we see when, we're going to see this in front of future verbs when we're talking about using the concept of when. 10. Next we have the root hey, yud, hey, which is to be like to happen, was. This is the Hebrew way of saying was, had been, will be, but this is not